Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just stood there and good job.
I'll be at the beer garden after this if you need me. Well, not drinking, working. To be clear, I'll be working.
I'll see you later.
Yeah.
No, was that, just the one of yours ran it? Just the boy?
And Annabelle, yeah.
Oh, did Annabelle run? So I didn't see.
She was
further
way ahead, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Show off.
Yeah, right. It was good. Yeah, I think the K went over well. Everyone really enjoyed that. I think we had like 60 kids.
Yeah, that kids run is a fun thing. And also recruiting new runners for the future.
Right.
I saw somebody posted on Facebook that they had their kid running the kids K, and she told them, you have to run fast because we got to get to your softball game. So he was like, the second one done, let's go.
Jeff,
We gotta
Craig has a grandson pitching for the Rocks?
Yeah.
I just heard that today.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's pitching Wednesday.
I think he's pitching a game tomorrow.
Yeah.
I got a chance to get tickets, but I can't make it.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
That's all he does too. He doesn't
People
like that
coming
too
in.
much. All he does is pitch. Not used to that.
Well, that's kind of the minor leagues, isn't it? It sounds like he's got a few people looking. Yeah.
you can fire it up whenever you're ready, Jake.
All right, call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all for say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We'll now have the 2022 audit presentation report from Schlenner and Winter. Which one are we following?
Okay, so we're going through this one, and it's also up on the screen. And this is essentially like the shortened version of the other two documents. So we go through, all the financial information, and then the things we're required to tell you all, audit opinion, kind of the most important stuff out of all those big documents. If you can't sleep at night, go ahead and read the big documents, but we'll go through this today. I did bring Rianne with me as well. She has worked on this audit, I think since probably you started at Schlenner Winter, and kind of doing some dual training where she's kind of going to learn to do what I'm doing. So I also just want to thank you all for being here today. I know normally we present at the early June meeting, but with the single audit and some of the additional disclosures required, it took us a little bit longer to get the reports and everything reviewed and stuff. So that's why we're here at this meeting today. So I will just get started with this.
And your name is?
My name is Ashley Maher.
Thank you.
And I'm a manager at Schlenner Winter, and I also have been working on Foley's audit since I started with Schlenner Winter about 8 years ago. All right. So this first page, audit process and opinion. So some of you have probably heard this before, but for new council members, anybody kind of wants to get an idea of what we do, this kind of depicts that in picture form. But essentially, we get the city's records. We do a number of testing, inquiries, procedures, and really through all that, we're looking to issue an opinion. So for the city, we're issuing an unmodified or clean opinion. That's good. That's the opinion you want to be issued. It means no significant errors or issues or misstatements arose during our procedures. Required communication. So these are things we're actually required to tell you all. Overall, the audit went smoothly. We have a positive working relationship with management. Sarah, Monica, and the team here get us everything we need. No issues as far as getting documentation or anything. Throughout the audit, everything went well. We noted nothing unusual in terms of our recorded transactions or accounting policies or treatments. So no concerns there. And then the only estimates that we report in the financial statements are those related to the net pension asset and liability and those related balances. That's related to the Minnesota PERA and then the fire relief net pension asset. Same as in the past, that's nothing new, and also something that most governmental entities report within their financial statements. So nothing new or different there. Controls and compliance. A lot of this is going to look pretty similar to in the past for those of you who have seen this before. Audit adjustments. We had some audit adjustments that we recorded during our audit process, the majority of which were not material. Nothing concerning or out of the ordinary there. Internal controls, that second column. This will look pretty similar to in the past, but I will go a little bit deeper dive into the lack of segregation of duties, finding that very top bullet point. So as you might recall in the past, we've reported this finding for the city. With our findings for internal controls, we have three options. So there's a material weakness, that's the highest level. It basically means a material misstatement can occur in the financial statements if this control is not working properly. Next is significant deficiency, that's kind of your middle tier. Means a misstatement could exist due to this control lacking, but it's not going to be a material misstatement. And then we have a control deficiency, that's the very bottom, and that potentially we don't even have to tell you about. It's pretty minor. It might be within one transaction cycle, not super concerning. So historically, for segregation of duties for the city, we reported it at a material weakness, so the highest level of deficiency there. This year, we're reporting it as a significant deficiency, so kind of that mid-tier. Reason being, adding another staff here has helped that and allowed the city to segregate accounting duties more properly compared to in the past. We did a little bit deeper dive as well into controls and kind of the processes that the city has in place in regards to controls and the financials, just because we had a new auditing standard come out that required us to do so. But really through that, it was good because we were able to downgrade that finding there. So that's really good news. That means adding that additional person allowed that finding to be less of a concern for the city as a whole. Potential in the future, we're working with Sarah and the team here to kind of potentially get rid of that finding in the future. We had some suggestions as far as things that can be changed and done differently. So maybe in the next few years we have some potential to not even have to report that finding. And then we also must tell you all that we draft the financial statements. So that big book we drafted on behalf of the city. And then Sarah reviews, and then we represent that to you all today. Any questions at all on the controls? All right, and then that final column, Minnesota legal compliance. So during our procedures, we're required to look at various areas of Minnesota statutes that the city must comply with. We look at contracts, we look at disbursements, we look at cash and banks, and a plethora of different areas that we look at. Through all those procedures, we had just one item that we noted, a broker acknowledgement certification. There was one investor that did not, or investment company that did not return the broker acknowledgement certification back to the city. Sarah reached out several times. They did not return it. Because of that, it is per statute something that the city must get from the investment companies that they work with. So we did note that and report as a finding for Minnesota legal compliance. We talked to Sarah a little bit about, potentially is it something where you don't work with that investment company anymore because they're not getting back to you, not getting you what you need, or, you reached out several times, and there's only so much you can do. We realize that.
I'll just say,
yes, go ahead.
the change that happened is this, the rep used to be located in St. Cloud. They've kind of semi-retired and relocated down to Florida, Boca Raton. Since then, we've had a hard time getting documents and such back. So we'll have to have that discussion because it is ultimately our responsibility to get that form or acknowledgement back. So if they're not responding, we're going to have to figure something else out.
And basically what that acknowledgement states is that the investments that the city has through this company is are only the allowed ones, basically, because cities and local governments are only allowed to invest in certain things, essentially. So that broker acknowledgement is their broker stating, yep, we've only invested in the allowed things that cities are allowed to invest in. Of course, we didn't have any issues as far as what the city was investing in, but the statutes say that the city must get that acknowledgement from the broker. Any questions at all on that?
Getting back to proper segregation of duties.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that because we don't use our staff, all our staff, or we're short of people to do this probably?
I think as of right now, I do think there's potential with the staff that the city has right now to segregate properly. I think there's a few areas, especially reviewing things that are done, and maybe noting that with a sign off, things like that, that will allow that segregation to be probably more proper, so to speak. But I don't think it's a necessity that at this point that the city would add an additional staff to cause that to be proper.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And we'll work with you, Sarah, and if there's things that, I think there was a couple of things that we had in mind, but I might go back through our files and kind of give you a hit list of things that you can add in the future, and then we can potentially get rid of that finding.
Yeah, and I think the improvement we got too was because last year we did have some suggestions, and when we structured and kind of reshuffled duties, that's why we improved, I think, too, is because we did shuffle some things around, so I think we have a few more things to do.
Yep.
It's possible we could reach that point.
Yep,
Okay.
definitely. This very next page, single audit or federal program compliance audit. This is new for 2022. So the city had federal dollars in excess of $750,000 come through. Of course, that's related to the wastewater project. So that Minnesota PFA dollars that's coming through via the loan, those are federal dollars. So anytime any local government or actually any entity spends over $750,000 in one fiscal year, then we must do this additional federal program compliance audit. So it's taking a deeper dive into the spending of those federal dollars. So we had to do basically additional procedures on that project to take a look at, is the city spending those federal dollars how they're supposed to be? In doing so, really, you'll see here, all good news as far as what we looked at. We noted an unmodified or clean opinion over the schedule of federal expenditures, and we had no findings, either compliance-wise or control-wise, in relation to that program. So that's all really good news, especially being the city has not had a single audit in quite some time. I mean, I know as long as I've worked with the city, there hasn't been a single audit. Yeah, it's been a long time. So the fact that we were able to take a deeper dive into that and everything checked out, that's really good. We often run into situations like this where we're taking a deeper dive into the federal funding, and then we have findings because the city isn't aware of the compliance requirements, things like that. But everything checked out, so that's really good. All right, taking a look at the numbers, we'll start off with the general fund. So for the general fund, there was an increase in fund balance of about $51,000 with an ending balance of just under $3.2 million. We'll take maybe a deeper dive into each piece of the puzzle there over the next few slides here. Starting off with revenues. So revenues decreased overall about $65,000 for the general fund. Some fluctuations in property taxes, intergovernmental decreased. That's primarily due to some small city assistance that the state granted in 2021, but not in 2022. Other than that, some investment losses there. A lot of our cities that have investments are kind of seeing those losses, as many of us are, as far as investments not doing well at this point in time. Other than that, you'll see not a ton of fluctuations in any of the other categories. So pretty similar from 2021 to 2022. All right, and expenditures on the flip side, overall increase of about $86,000. General government increased, mostly salaries, adding an additional person, of course. General increase in costs, we're seeing that with a lot of our cities, which all of us are seeing general increases in costs. Public safety, similar, general increases in costs, fuel, vehicle expenses. Other than that, the other few areas, Public Works, Parks and Rec, capital outlay, pretty similar from year to year. And then unassigned fund balance for the general fund, as you might recall, those of you who have heard this before, that unassigned fund balance, that's a portion of basically your reserve of your general fund balance that's spendable. So that spendable portion, we take a look at that as a percent of the budget. So how much compared to the budget is that percentage? We had a slight decrease from 2021 to 2022, and that for 2022 sat at about just under 155%. But you'll see there the fund balance policy that the city sets as a target is 50 to 65%. So you're still sitting well above basically your target that you're looking to stay above and beyond. So just some spending down of unassigned during 2022. Nothing concerning there. Still quite healthy, honestly, as far as a spendable portion of your fund balance goes. Right, and cash for the general fund, just a slight increase there. That sat at just under 3.1 million for 2022. We'll take a look at a few other funds, governmental funds for the city. Fire service fund, increase in fund balance and ending fund balance of about just under 592,000. EDA fund, decrease, ending fund balance of negative 114.95. EDA fund had during 2022, and this is a little bit deceiving the way it's presented here, but there was an industrial parkland contract for deed that was signed. So on the financials, we show that as an outflow. What's not shown on here is the inflow, so to speak. We call it an inflow of debt because the city signed that contract for deed, had that inflow, not necessarily cash, for that contract for deed, and then paid that out to purchase the land for the industrial park. 2020 improvement bond fund, just slight decrease in fund balance, ending fund balance of 716,000. And then the street projects fund, decrease spending of about 398,000. That was for the Highway 23 project. As expected, that street projects fund, that's how it's to be used, is to be spent on capital projects as they come about. So that Highway 23 project, the streets portion was quoted there. And then cash for those funds that I just discussed, actually for the funds as a whole for the city, are presented here. Not a ton of fluctuation. The main one you'll see there is the capital projects. That's just the Highway 23 spending. Other than that, you'll see a lot of these similar from 2021 to 2022.
So when you say this is Highway 23 project, is any of this going towards the sewer line?
I'll maybe let you speak to that, Sarah.
No, the sewer, it would be in the enterprise fund.
Okay.
Yeah, the sewer fund.
Right. Just about one more slide, we'll take a look at that. The water fund here, increase in that position of just under 200,000, ending of about 4.2 million. Overall increase in operating revenue, increase in rates and structures there. Some investment losses there, not huge for the water fund. Other than that, just that general overall increase in net position. And then on the next slide, the sewer fund, this is where the activity for the wastewater project is recorded. So you'll see there that non-operating revenues line item obviously is rather large. That's the state grant funding that funded a portion of that project. So about 8 million there is state funding for the project. Other than that, you won't see the spending on the project in like expenses or non-operating expenses here, because that is capitalized as a capital asset. So that will remain as an asset of the city over time and will be depreciated once that project is complete. So you'll see that in your huge increase, or you'll have an increase in your net position essentially. So, your capital assets, which I'll show in a couple pages here, obviously are gonna increase because you had that asset added for the wastewater infrastructure. Cause obviously that's expected to last for many, many years to come, so we record that as an asset of the city.
So when we fix the water tower, that comes out of the water fund, or that comes out of somewhere else?
Water fund, yep. Yeah, so the cash, obviously water fund, pretty similar year to year. Sewer fund, big decrease there. Some of that though, was some receivables at year end, waiting for grant and loan funding to come, loan funding essentially to come through. Timing basically, but all those costs that were for the wastewater project submitted and then reimbursed via the PFA or the state dollars.
I'll just add, we are waiting on some of the reimbursements, just because we didn't know the timing with all the grant funds. We weren't submitting everything, we're using cash, still holding out. We will probably submit more for that loan, but we wanna keep that loan or that interest costs, into where we target it to be. So some of that cash might fluctuate and it'll look a little different next year.
Yep.
Once all the other funding comes in.
Yep. Alright, and then here's government-wide assets. You'll see huge increase in that red bar, so that capital or non-current, going from just under 15 million to just over 33 million. That's that wastewater project being capitalized as an asset of the city there. So that 33 million, a lot of that increase there is that wastewater project. There was some other assets added during the year for the city, but a lot of that, about 18 million, was construction in progress at year end for the wastewater project. Other than that, not a ton of fluctuation for current assets or net pension. This next page, liabilities on the flip side, kind of seeing the same thing. So that red bar, that debt or non-current, that's that Minnesota PFA debt, that's for the wastewater project. So most of that increase from the 5 million to the 14 million is due to that new debt being issued for the project. Other than that, some increases in current liabilities, about $500,000 of that is construction payables related to the project, and fluctuation net pension liability in numbers from the state.
Why is that up 800,000 then, almost?
The net pension liability?
Yeah.
So there was some fluctuations in the discount rate that the state, we get all these numbers from the state of Minnesota, might I add, nothing comes from actual amounts that the city is incurring liabilities for. The fire, or police and fire fund, or line, so to speak, there's the general, what do they call it? So it's that, and then the police and fire had a change in the discount rate, so that fluctuates the net pension liability immensely. That was in no way due to the city contributing more or less. I think contributions I looked were about the same from 2021 to 2022. It's truly due to actuarial estimates and discount rates that the state comes up with, so to speak. A lot. I always want to say that some of it's made up, but but it all comes from the state numbers. Any other questions on that?
No.
All right, and then debt, we'll just do a couple of slides here on debt. So this is going to look a little bit different than what we presented in the past. We're showing here future debt payments. So this gets you a better idea of when will governmental activities debt of the city be paid off, and then how much are those payments each year. So debt sat at about 4.9 million for the governmental activities, and will be paid off in 2034 there. So and then listed on the bottom there is the debt issued for governmental activities, some bonds, and then that industrial park land contract for deed that I talked about earlier.
just have a question.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just the contract for deed that's included, not the option agreement? It's not included until there's official contract for deed?
Just, yeah, it would
Okay.
just be the contract for deed.
So the 5-year contract for deed is in here, there's
Yep.
potential we may add another 5 years.
Yep, yeah,
That's
we
what I
just,
wanted to confirm.
it's strictly 5 years, so that's only shown on here like through 2028 or 2027, something like
thank you.
that, so, yep. And then, business type activities, this is solely, the Minnesota PFA debt for the wastewater infrastructure project, that was issued in 2022. You'll see that has, payoff date around 2041 or 2040. And you'll see the payments there, close to about $1 million each year. Starting off a little bit lower just because the balance on the hasn't reached its full as of 12/31/22. And then just something we're required to tell you all is there's one new accounting standard coming next year, GASB 96. This is for software. So any long-term software contracts that the city signs, we're not seeing a lot of this with our cities, more so with like our school districts that we work with. We're required to record essentially an asset and a liability for those contracts on the city's government-wide financial statements. So we just kind of explain that here. Very similar to GASB 87 leases that we did this year, which actually leases, we had nothing we had to record for the city. So it often fluctuates based on what the city has going on. If there are any long-term software subscriptions, we're not seeing a ton for cities that we work with, but we'll take a deeper dive into that with next year's audit. And then my contact information is there, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Another audit done. I will just say kudos to Sarah, Monica, and really the whole team here. We always, as I mentioned earlier, always get what we need for the audit. Things are done timely. We never have concerns that we're not going to get what we need to get done. So definitely always a pleasure to work with.
Any other questions for Ashley? Is that all you got for us?
That's it.
I'd entertain a motion to approve this audit.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all for say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you all.
Great job. Great job, guys.
Is there any other business to come before us?
I just have one item, June 28th, from 11 to 1, we'd like to do a company or a get-together with the staff, with a lunch out at Holdridge Park. So if any council members would like to come, we're just gonna do a small little gathering, get the seasonal pool employees as well. So, June 28th. Maybe it'll rain by then. And I don't know if you have any other questions for us. Otherwise, we'll plan on our regular business. Then in second week of July would be the next meeting, second Tuesday because of the holiday.
If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made and second to adjourn. All for say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
This went too fast. I can't go uptown yet.
Not 5 o'clock somewhere.